The sun had started to set by the time we made it back to the complex. Mercifully, it was still light out, for now, and after everything that happened yesterday, the thought weighed heavily on my mind. But as we turned into the parking lot, my attention was promptly pulled elsewhere. What? Oh, who? Hizumatsu-san peered through the passenger side window at the large truck occupying one corner of the lot. Who died? Someone had to die, right? It was much larger than any delivery truck, that much was for certain. As it happened, the truck had situated itself directly over my assigned parking spot. With that, Hizumatsu-san hopped out of the car and craned his neck up at the complex. Nearly all of the apartment doors were visible from this position. Just then, Hizumatsu-san's gaze settled in a single direction. Had he seen them? His expression was as hard as stone. I quickly rolled down the window to call out to him, but he didn't respond. Instead, he walked right up to the driver's side door and opened it. He grabbed me by the shoulder, urging me to get out. What is happening? Wait, who was on 203? Was it the family with the little kid? I understood immediately. Apartment 203 was directly adjacent to 202. And as with 201, 203 reputedly went through a lot of tenants. Without pausing to kill the engine, I whipped off my seatbelt as fast as I could, jumped out of the car and dashed up to the second floor. On the way up, I passed a handful of movers carrying furniture downstairs. Once I reached 203, I found the door wide open. I ran right up as a man, likely the tenant, was on his way out. Wait, she didn't greet him when she did the whole moving in thing? He appeared to be in his early 40s. He had a washcloth around his neck and a cardboard box in his hand. Fuck me. Sorry, getting angry at me being unable to read the simplest of sentences here. As soon as he spotted me, he shot me a suspicious look. His tone was gruff and defensive. He seemed tired. This was my first time meeting him, but I could tell he was worn out. As I lingered on the spot, his gaze turned hostile. Wow, what is wrong with you, dude?
私、201に昨日引っ越してきたものなんですけど。
201? That got his attention.
はい、まだご挨拶してなかったからご存知ないとは思いますけど。随分急なお引っ越しのようですね。
I mean, they can't be the only ones that noticed this stuff, right? He has to have noticed too.
別にあんたには関係ない。
Did the landlady maybe tell him, okay, you can move out, but don't tell anyone about this? Talk about a bad attitude. The man forced his way past me, cardboard box in his arms. After witnessing the exchange, Hizumatsu-san turned back to the stairs. He nodded and was about to head off when he froze. His gaze focused on something behind me. Oh god, no. I turned to find a woman, likely the man's wife, standing at the entrance to 203. Maybe it only happens to women. Maybe he's in such a bad mood because his woman forced him to move out.
何か。私、昨日201に引っ越してきた結城と言います。
She looked at me fearfully. As with her husband, she was carrying a cardboard box, though hers was smaller, of course.
外出から帰ってきたところなんですけど、その下にトラックが止まってたもので。
Ask her about the fucking apartment, you dimwit. Come on, Kai.
車ですね。あと少しで引っ越しが終わりますから、少し待ってください。
She timidly moved past me.
ずいぶん急な引っ越しですね。お仕事の都合か何かですか？
At this, she visibly flinched. Don't hurt me.
そんなもんね。
Her voice was shaking, as was the rest of her. I could see her fingers tighten around the edges of her cardboard box.
一旦202の駐車場に避けと
Oh
きますか
god,
ら。
yeah, mentioning 202 just in an off sentence like that. Kai, you're a sly bitch, you know that? This little comment was far more effective than I had anticipated. Man, I love her, she's amazing. Sometimes she's dense, but 99% of the time, she does exactly what I would do. Holy shit, the instant 202 left my lips, the woman practically jumped out of her skin. Her box tumbled to the floor. I heard a dull crunch as the item inside shattered, but the woman was trembling too violently to notice. It's kinda mean actually, you made her drop something important maybe. Hisamatsu-san scooped up the box and handed it to her. It's broken! Just then her husband reappeared behind her.
おい久江、荷物はそれで終わりか。
And you drop it! Bam! Immediately slapping that bitch. But Hisae didn't respond. The man took one look at his scared, shaking wife and paled.
おい久江、どうした？久江、あんたら何か久江に言ったのか？
The man looked about ready to deck Hisamatsu-san in the face, but the bespectacled youth answered calmly.
いえ、車が止められないから202に避けときますからというつもりがこうなってしまったんです。
It was the truth after all. Thankfully, Hisamatsu-san had my back while I was too flustered to respond. Meanwhile, the man's expression softened. Or maybe because he doesn't believe in the bullshit.
ああ、いや、もう終わりますから。
Or maybe because he knows that he should lay it low with this whole topic. An awkward tension hung in the air. Just then, a voice called out from inside 203.
高橋さん、壁と窓の新聞はどうしますか？剥がします？
Holy shit! Oh, it's the same thing happening again. Who the hell is Matt Caroland, though? It must have been one of the movers trying to help expedite the process. But Mr. and Mrs. Takahashi reacted violently.
剥がすな！
Oh, so it affected him too, huh? Oh, this picture is kind of scary. Is there a way to... Yeah, this is kind of fucking scary, to be honest. Jesus! Curious appeared inside and froze. Based on what I could see, the layout of the apartment was identical to mine. But the living room window was completely covered over with newspaper. Panicked, the man dashed back inside the apartment, then turned and nodded to us.
もう少しで終わりますから。ちょっと下で待っててください。
Without waiting for a reply, the man slammed the door shut and began to scream at the movers.
剥がすな！剥がすんじゃない！
Meanwhile, the three of us, myself, Hisamatsu-san, and Takahashi-san's wife, trudged down to the first floor. Maybe they do want to talk after all? Oh god, she's broken. Once we arrived back at the parking lot, Hisae-san loaded her box onto the truck, then sat down on the bumper. She looked so exhausted I couldn't help but reach out to her.
何かあったんですか？
Nani? She looked up at me weakly, her lips twitching. Was she trying to smile?
あの新聞紙、どうしてあんなに貼ってるんですか？
I heard Hisamatsu-san call out from behind me. His shadow stretched across the asphalt as the sun continued to decline beyond the horizon.
もう引っ越すからいいわよね。別に。
Over her shoulder, I saw the landlady walk into 203. Maybe she wanted to say one last goodbye to her tenant. Maybe she wanted to remind them not to talk about whatever transpired in there.
あなた201に入ったって。
Yes, I fucking did. I done goofed, I know. I nodded.
昨日入居しました。
そう。かわいそうに。とんでもないところに入ったものね。
Her impending freedom seemed to bolster her courage to speak.
私たちはね。
Wow.
1年我慢したの。あの地獄に。もっとも。ここしばらくは。 ビジネスホテル暮らしだったけど、もう一日だって我慢できないわ、あんな部屋。
I wonder how freaky it would be to live in a place that's supposedly haunted, with random noises and stuff, and you seeing things. Does it really break you like that? She attempted another smile, though whether out of scorn or fear I wasn't certain.
何があったか教えてもらえませんか。
いいの？話しても。
Isai-san's voice shook. It sounded less like a request for permission and more like a warning.
聞いても聞かなくても見るものが一緒なら聞いておいた方がいいです。
It was the honest truth, and it was this sentiment that motivated me into all that legwork today. Isai-san glanced up at me. Her expression was one of pity. Then she went back to staring at her hands.
女がね、染み出してくるのよ。
染み出してくる。
壁からね、少しずつ。
I mean, this could be a
少しずつ。
great... Oh, sorry, I interrupted her. This could be a great setup for a hentai, but it's a horror story. So, I tried to picture it, but couldn't. It just didn't make any sense.
勇気があるなら、私たちが出た後に壁の新聞紙を剥がしてみたらいいわ。
Then you'll
意味
see.
がわかるから。
I wonder what they will see. What does it mean? Her seeping through the walls. Does she leave any traces?
窓の新聞紙は
Hisamatsu-san, who had been quiet for some time, finally spoke. But I had a feeling I knew the answer.
手がね、
手
女の手が窓を這い回るの。カーテンを閉めても
How does this work? Even if you close the curtains, you'll still see it. What? A shiver ran down my spine. Isai-san hopped off the truck and walked over to me as if she sensed my fear. Then she pulled something from her pocket and pushed it into my hands.
大家さんに内緒で作った合鍵。あの部屋にあるものを見たら、何が起こるか分かったら、どこかに避難した方がいいわ。
Why would you make a spare key for a place that's haunted? If she had known that she could warn others with it, okay, but it doesn't seem like she had this intention at all at first.
少なくとも夜の間だけでも。
Her voice was quiet, yet impassioned. Moved by her entreaty, I cupped my right hand around hers. Moments later, I felt a small metal object land in my palm. I looked down at my hand to find myself holding a key, one that looked very similar to my own.
なぜ私に。
Yeah, why are you doing this to me?
本当はそういうの専門の雑誌社に売る予定だったの。でもその記者が来なくなったから無駄になっちゃった。
Again, I have to praise this game. I raised concern over a pretty minor plot point, like why she would make a key for this flat, for this apartment. And about a minute later, the game explains why she did it. So, Jesus, this is amazing. I've never played a game that was as well thought. Well, I guess I did, but this is really well thought out for a simple horror story. I guess it isn't as simple. I wasn't sure what to say. The key felt heavy in my hand. I could feel it practically begging to be used.
おい久江行くぞ
Just like my pen. That's what I wanted to say. Just like my pen. Begging to be used. At a sudden voice, I realized her husband was standing beside the moving truck. Behind him, I could see the landlady heading back to her house, looking quite displeased, huh? The man looked over at me.
すいませんねもう出ますから
Why didn't he want to talk about it? Then he headed to his car and hopped inside as if he was washing his hands of the place entirely. Isai-san watched him go, then turned back to us.
じゃあお元気で。
高橋さんもお元気で。
With a wave, she turned and climbed into her husband's car. No sooner had the passenger door shut than the car backed up and took off out of the parking lot. Man, that's a heavy and difficult sentence, followed shortly by the moving truck. Left alone under the red glow of the sunset, I stared down wordlessly at the key in my hand. So will we do it tonight, or will we wait?
動かそうか。
His words brought me back to reality with a start.
大丈夫。
I headed over to my car, all the while gazing up at apartment 203. The Takahashi family's fearful expressions lingered in my mind.
剥がすな。
Yeah, that was pretty fucking scary. What on earth were they so afraid of? And would it be that bad if the movers saw it? It would be witnesses. You want that. Stuffing the key in my pocket, I climbed into the driver's seat. So, what now, huh? Chapter
その
12.
鍵どうするんですか？
I parked my car in the complex parking lot and hopped out.
203の鍵のこと。
Obviously, that was what he meant. Hisamatsu-san nodded and looked up at the second floor.
そんなに急ぐこともないとは思うけど、もし明日ハウスクリーニングに入ったら、その鍵があっても意味がな
Oh,
いでしょ。
so we will do it tonight, huh? Shit, he had a point. While it was unlikely she'd be able to fill the vacancy anytime soon, I knew there were always exceptions. Myself, for example. The apartment would be cleaned, the newspapers would be taken down, and eventually it would be as though nothing strange had ever happened. At that point, I would lose any chance I had of learning exactly what had taken place there. What about the cleaning people? What if they saw what you're about to see? Wouldn't they raise questions as well? Assuming another tenant like Takahashi-san didn't turn up, that is.
行きましょうよ。俺もついてくから。
Easy for you to say, I thought.
でももうすぐ暗くなっちゃうけど。
暗くなったらもっと行けなくなるよ。行くなら今のうち。
Okay, point taken.
さあ、行きましょう。
He's so upbeat about this. How can he? Apparently he wasn't about to take no for an answer. Hisamatsu-san slung an arm around my shoulder, and set off toward the main entrance. I found myself having to half jog just to keep up with his stride.
ちょっと待って久松さん。
第5でいいですよ。
ちょっと待って。
いやそんないきなり慣れ慣れしい。
同じ謎を追う戦友でしょ。気にしない気にしない。
あなたは気にしなくても。
It was another story to me, actually. But before I could get the words out, he suddenly came to a stop. We had arrived at the freshly vacated apartment 203. The door seemed to tower menacingly before us, impeding our path.
ゆきさん、鍵。
あ、私のことは名字でいいんだ。
You didn't... Did you want him to use your first name? I think you didn't.
だって名前聞いてないですし。
Oh yeah, this too. Come to think of it, he had a point. That said, I got a feeling that telling him my name was tantamount to letting him win, so instead I pulled the key out of my pocket and silently handed it to him, just ignoring the whole thing altogether.
俺が開けるんですか？
I nodded and he plucked the key from my palm. Just like that, my hand felt worlds lighter.
誰が開けても一緒ですよ、こんなの。
Yeah, you both cursed anyway.
久松さんは怖くないの？
Maybe a little.
第5。怖いですよ。俺も人間ですからね。
Contrary to his claim, he promptly stuck the key in the lock and rotated it. There was a metallic click as the cylinder turned. He put the key into his pocket and grasped the doorknob. Behind us, the sunset was fading fast. It would only get darker from here.
久松さん、大丈夫？
It's Daigo, Kai. For fuck's sake.
第5だってば。大丈夫じゃないけど、大丈夫です。ゆうきさんこそ
Never
大丈
been
夫。
better.
大丈夫じゃないってば。ちっとも。
じゃあ行きましょ
Yep, let's go. What part of this is perfect? Before I could retort, Hisamatsu-san twisted the knob. The door swung open with a dull metallic groan, and he promptly walked right in.
どうせクリーニングに入るからいいよね。
Hisamatsu-san stepped inside without pausing to take his shoes off. I followed suit. Darkness fell over us as I shut the door behind me. There was still plenty of daylight left outside, and yet the interior of the apartment was as dark as night. Maybe because of the newspaper?
新聞紙貼ってるからだよね。
Oh, of course. I remember the newspapers I'd seen covering all the windows. Still, we needed a light source if we were to investigate anything. I moved to open the door again.
待って、明かりならあるから。
As he spoke, a small beam of light suddenly flared to life before me, and I realized he was using the flashlight app on his cell phone. Great. Without further ado, Hisamatsu-san walked to the windows and unceremoniously tore down the newspapers. The light of the sunset filtered into the room all at once, brightening our surroundings considerably. Emboldened by the last rays of daylight, I moved further into the apartment. What if the landlady saw that they didn't tear down the newspapers, and tomorrow she'll come in here and the newspaper is torn down? What will she think? I debated taking my shoes off, but ultimately decided against it. Meanwhile, Hisamatsu-san continued to tear down the newspapers indiscriminately, but as I approached, he suddenly fell still.
どうしたの？
同じだ。
His voice was so faint it wasn't clear whether he'd actually heard my question. He stared wide-eyed at the window pane.
同じって何が？
Followed his gaze to the window, but couldn't see much. Beyond the window lay the balcony. It didn't look particularly damaged or dirty, minus some handprints on the... Handprints?
これ。
Now the important thing is, are those handprints made from the outside or from the inside? I heard my voice shift up an octave. Hisamatsu-san's fingers trailed over the glass. That's when I realized.
姉ちゃんの時と同じだ。
The handprints were on the outside of the glass, okay. Illuminated by the sunset, I could see dozens and dozens of them. But why would the culprit hit the window in the first place?
暗くなる前に壁も見るか。
Just then, I noticed that the sun had set almost completely. Hisamatsu-san straightened up and moved to the nearest newspaper-covered wall.
本当に剥がす。
Come on, I want to know what's behind the newspapers now.
そのために入ったんでしょ。
Standing behind him, I couldn't see his expression, but I could tell his shoulders were stiff.
剥がしますよ。
His voice wavered faintly. Glancing at me over his shoulder, he reached up high with one hand. His fingers clamped around the top of the newspaper, and then he whipped his hand down in one fluid motion. A loud ripping sound rent the air as the newspaper tore all the way down. With Hisamatsu-san standing in the way, I couldn't really see the wall. A strangled groan escaped his lips as he froze, rooted to the spot.
久松さん。
What is it? I couldn't bring myself to get any closer. I knew I needed to see the wall for myself, but I couldn't take a single step. Come on!
ねえ久松さん。どうしたの？
In response to my question, Hisamatsu-san shuddered visibly.
こりゃひでえ。
He stumbled backwards and I caught a glimpse of something over his shoulder. There looked to be some sort of stain on the white wallpaper.
何？
I still couldn't really make it out from here. Finally, I took a step forward, bringing myself shoulder to shoulder with Hisamatsu-san. Is this a stain? A scream welled up in the back of my throat, but Hisamatsu-san quickly clapped a trembling hand over my mouth.
ダメだ、静かに。
I stood, knees shaking, too transfixed on the wall to listen. Let's take another look here. Is there no picture mode for this thing? For fuck's sake. Damn. Wait, is there or isn't there? Shit, there isn't. Fuck. I guess you can make it out alright, right? Hisamatsu-san pulled me into an embrace. Oh, as if to shield me from the sight.
落ち着いて。俺が言えた義理じゃないけど、落ち
I
着いて。
guess it's just a picture of the creepy woman? I could hear the squeak in my voice. It felt like that scream was still clogging my throat. Even with Hisamatsu-san blocking the way, I could still see the wall in my mind. Clear state, Jesus. A strange stain stood out in bold relief on the wall. A stain in the shape of a woman with disheveled hair and hate in her eyes. I would have thought that maybe it would be something creepier.